Well, that was stupid.
What do you mean?
Dante just got impaled by a blade and shrugged it off like no one's business, but not even 5 minutes ago I got my ass handed to me and almost died.
Yeah, it's a cutscene, and he's a demon.
And he's clearly immortal.
What's your point?
My point is, if he can be impaled and walk it off, why do I need to worry about dying in the main game?
You know you're playing a game, right? If they made it invulnerable in game, the game would end up being super easy and ruin any challenge it has.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, could you imagine a game where you don't die? It'd be stupid. Games with no death just don't really hit. I mean, in Animal Crossing, you can kind of die in that. You can get impaled by a scorpion.
Okay, guys, I've got a great idea. I don't know about you, but one of the reasons I play games is to escape from the depressing reality we live in, with things like debt, loneliness, stress from work, and the uphill battle of trying to have a social life. The last thing I want to do is boot up a game and just relive what I do on a daily basis. Okay, bad example. One thing I've noticed over the years is while a lot of games tend to move away from the majority of these traits, the one thing most games keep is mortality. A game's got to have a challenge, right? You need that fear of seeing a game over on your screen to keep the player on the edge of their seat, and the best way to do that is dangle the fear of mortality on a stick over the player's face. And it clearly works. Some games are designed in such a way to be so brutal about it that there's entire genres of games focused on beating you senseless whenever you walk around the corner. But I've been thinking, what if you took out the concept of mortality? And I don't mean like plot armor and cutscenes, I mean, what if there was no way to die? So something like the gameplay of Elden Ring with a casual challenge of something like, I don't know, the Dog Island. So I went to record a bit of gameplay of the Dog Island after making that comparison, and I've come to realise that this was a terrible example. Since the story of the Dog Island is about your sibling being on death's door and your dad disappearing looking for a cure. Honestly, I have no idea how to segue away from that, but I was hoping to segue towards a game called NeverDead. I'm sure like most people you'd have seen this box on the shelves back in the day and thought, whoa, what's that? Is that the new DMC Devil May Cry game? Oh wait, no, that's next year. NeverDead is a bit of a weird one because the game itself was from the mind of Shinta Nojiri, a developer from Konami who had previously worked on games like Metal Gear Solid and even directed the Metal Gear Acid series. So you'd expect a new IP from someone who's worked on such a beloved franchise to be kept internally. Yet for NeverDead, they reached out across the seas into England and worked with a small company called Rebellion. Yeah, the company known for making the Sniper Elite series.
Oh no, Shadow Demon!
Going from various reviews, the reception of this game seems to be a bit all over the place, some saying it's good while others say it's awful, but a pattern I've noticed is that a lot of people appreciated the concept, but it was just poorly executed. And after playing it, I can agree with that completely. NeverDead is a hack and slash game where you take the role of a demon hunter attempting to prevent demons from taking over the world. Booting up the game, you're greeted with a rather grungy main menu of a man slouched in a chair with a rather catchy menu track. Oh yeah, this game has a multiplayer mode. I wonder if anybody's still playing. Yeah, not surprising. Well, I don't want to sit here and look at the matchmaking screen for the rest of my life, so I might as well have a look at the single player. Booting up the single player campaign, it starts with a cutscene of a woman going down an alleyway before being in a scrape with a demon, and then the game will then go into a flashback of your main hang on, is that a frog?
Ah, I simply adore that shade of salmon pink.
What? So turns out, this thing is a demon, and our main character, Bryce here, is a demon hunter. What a coincidence! After the cutscene ends, you're thrown into what I'd call a glorified interactive intro cutscene, where you just run around and try to shoot him, while names of the developers pop up on the screen. It's fine, I guess. There's nothing special about it outside of some slow motion segments. For a first impression though, this doesn't come off great. I feel like it was meant to excite you into getting into the main game, but I wouldn't be surprised if some people just turned the game off after playing this bit. The gunplay really doesn't feel great here. After this brief segment, we're brought back into the present day with Bryce now looking much older and washed up. After the lady from the first cutscene shoots his door down and shoots him in the head in the process, we learn two things. Firstly, she's a work colleague of Bryce's called Arcadia, and more importantly, Bryce is immortal and has been alive for around 500 years. Turns out he works for a demon hunting organisation and he's been hired to investigate an asylum which is riddled with monsters. From here we get a more appropriate introduction into what NeverDead is. Basically it's a hack and slash game, but that's not all. With Bryce being an immortal we have some light puzzle elements thrown into the mix where you need to use your lack of self-destruction to your advantage. This could be something simple like setting yourself on fire to light a dark passage, using yourself to connect live wires to power doors, or as you soon discover after the game starts ripping your body apart, you can throw your head to go to different areas. Fortunately, thanks to Bryce's curse of immortality, you can easily reattach yourself together by either rolling over your body parts or just regenerating them. I found this aspect of the game quite fun, albeit a little limited at times. It felt like the game wanted to go further with this concept, but they didn't really know how to. Looking at the showcases about this game though, it's clear the devs loved this idea, so it's a shame they didn't really do much with it.
Hey Tommy, are you okay?
Recover with gas in time, alright, don't worry.
What's wrong with you? Hey, Tommy, what are you doing? It's strictly confidential that we have a real model for this title. Put it back, put it back.
Sorry, I've just got to say, it is the most daft yet amusing thing I've ever seen from a video game showcase. And the awkward laughter from the audience just makes it so much better.
Got my head back in place.
Tommy, it is incorrect.
Oh, sorry.
Before we go any further though, can I just take a moment to talk about Bryce? This guy feels like an anti-hero throughout the majority of this game. Being an immortal and living for over 500 years, he's obviously gone from being a cocky and optimistic hero figure to a rather sarcastic, bitter old man.
Yeah, riveting. So getting back to what I was saying, when the hell am I gonna get paid?
And I love it. It honestly feels like this is just a parody of Dante, and I'm all for it. There's a point in this game where Bryce saves someone who later on turns out to be important, and instead of letting his work colleague know, just in case they know anything about her, he decides to just get her arrested.
It's this kid.
Wait, what's going on?
She's a lousy thief. Worst of the worst. I caught her stealing my wallet.
Understood, sir.
What are
Miss,
you-
I'm gonna have to ask you to empty your pockets.
Most certainly will not. Do you know who I am? I am Nikki Summerfield, the one and only talented, gorgeous...
Explain this.
Where did that come from?
You can answer that question down at the station.
I'll leave her in your capable hands then.
Yes, sir. Leave it to me.
You sleazy moronic
Sorry, kid.
brute.
It's like the most subtle way to tell someone you don't like your job. Something I quite like as well is how Bryce's backstory is told throughout the game. At the start of the game you'll have brief segments where you go back to Bryce's origin story through some cutscenes, and you learn a couple of important things. First off, the girl he was with is known as a medium who can make demons vulnerable to attacks, leading to Frogman losing his finger.
Wait for it. I'll get you for this. You guys are all the same.
Why was there a fart there? I know that sounds like a very me thing to put into this video, but I promise you, that is the game doing this, not me. The devs beat me to the joke. Honestly, outside of that, the story isn't too bad. It's nothing super engaging, but it's enough to keep the progression of the story feeling smooth from start to finish, rather than stretching it out for the sake of more levels. What's more important I think with these kind of games is how well the combat flows, and the best way I can put it is, it's odd. But in a weird way sort of unique. In NeverDead you have two means to combat, your sword and then a bunch of different firearms you'll find throughout the game. Things like pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, it's all the standard gear, nothing really out of the ordinary. It's how they all work together that makes it stand out. Notice how there's two crosshairs on the screen. This is mostly because you fire akimbo weapons separately, but if you stand still long enough or click the right analog stick in, you can merge them into one, making it more accurate and easier to deal with. Also, there's a skill towards the end of the game, but by the time you get it, it's kinda useless. Another good thing about the firearms in this game is you're not restricted on what guns you have equipped. So let's say you want to cycle through the weapons and have a pistol in one hand and a shotgun in the other, you can do that. It sounds daft, but it ends up being super useful, and I really like this idea. The sword, however, I'm not convinced on. For me, it's too awkward for my liking. So instead of using the standard controls like let's say X and Y for a light and heavy attack, in this you hold down the left trigger and then use the right thumbstick to swing your sword. As a gimmick, sure, this would be fun for a few minutes, but you end up using the sword for the majority of the game since some enemies only take damage from guns or swords, with the ones taking damage from swords being the most common. I wouldn't call the entire combat system bad, but it's certainly rough. It kind of feels like they made it different for the sake of it being different to make it stand out, which there's nothing wrong with that, the firearms are fine, but using an analog stick constantly to control a sword, I can't say I'm a big fan of it, and I can't imagine that being a trend games will follow. Oh yeah, Grab by the Ghoulies did a similar combat system to this. Great, mention that twice in a row. Something else I find rather amusing thinking about it is how a year later Konami released Metal Gear Rising that features a similar mechanic with a sword, and it's so much better. When it comes to the overall risk of combat, there isn't much to worry about. At most you'll ragdoll about and lose parts of your body if you take too much damage. The only thing you really need to worry about is when you become just a head, since there's an enemy called a grandbaby whose sole purpose is to eat you. If you do get eaten by a grandbaby, you are given a chance to escape by a QTE, which should be simple, but for some reason has a rather slight delay to the input, so you need to time it just right, otherwise you'll be lost forever in its stomach being digested, which is rather gross. It's definitely a unique way to add a game over to a game where you're playing as someone who's immortal, but it also brings a good balance to the dismemberment system, since losing an arm or a leg isn't always a bad thing. But with the risk of now becoming a head and then getting eaten, it does make you consider your options. The good thing about losing an arm or a leg in this game is that you can use these body parts to either bait enemies to give yourself an advantage to kill them, or if you are still holding a firearm, you can throw an arm and then still use it from a distance, which is really cool and comes in quite handy for a boss later on. Plus there's a skill in this game you can unlock that if equipped, you can even trigger your body parts to explode like a grenade, and then just grow them back later. I think the only time I hated this mechanic is when you're bombarded with a ton of enemies, since you tend to ragdoll all over the place. Funny as it may be, towards the end of the game this became a huge strain on my patience, especially when there's multiple grandbabies just waiting to grab you. Which, yes, I understand this was the only way to cause a game over for the majority of the game, but there are times in this game where you get hit so much and keep breaking that you just constantly get eaten, and it ends up just dragging the pace of the gameplay to a halt until you can regrow your body.
Wait, that's a good point.
What's that?
Why can't you just regrow your body when inside a grandbaby and burst out?
Gee, I don't know. Why'd you ask a question that can get you fired?
But I was only...
For the most part, the game runs fine, but there are definitely some areas where the frame rate starts to slow down a bit, which isn't always an issue except when you're being thrown around like a ragdoll every time you get hit. It gets worse though when the game struggles to keep a consistent frame rate due to the sometimes rather frantic destruction in levels. Also, I'm not sure if it's just me or the game itself, but sometimes the visual clarity is just an absolute mess. Originally when I played this on a PS3 emulator, I thought that my PC configuration was set up wrong, but it turns out some levels just look this weird. It looks like the depth of field has been cranked up to overdrive and just looks like a blurred mess. God damn it. I'll admit though, I actually had a lot of fun with NeverDead. I love the concept, the main character is great, and the world seems like a fun parody of more popular games of the genre. But it's definitely rough. If anything, NeverDead feels like it was way too early for its own good, which is a shame since the PS4 and Xbox One were right around the corner. I bet if these games were delayed to be next-gen launch titles, it would have worked in the game's favour. Something I'd like to mention as well from when I was researching this game is how everyone involved with the project sounded like they were rather passionate about it. Even during the interviews, Shinta pretended to be a decapitated head on a table, which is oddly adorable. I'd consider NeverDead to be a rough gem of its time and it deserves some more love. I don't know, it might just be me, but I think that NeverDead deserves a second chance, either with a sequel, probably a remaster with some well needed quality of life improvements. We've seen weirder come from Konami, so anything's possible. So, what do you think? What? Wait, come on guys, we can reboot Contra, come on. Oh no. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This was a lot of fun to make. I don't normally do this kind of thing, but if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below if you know much about this game or if you think my opinion's bad. Also, thank you to my friends who chipped in for some cameos. I hope you enjoy those segments because, oh boy, have I got a lot more planned. But until then, thanks for watching. Happy New Year, and I hope you had a good winter holidays. I will be back soon. Hopefully. I promise. I'll see you in 6 months.